And now, your host, Couch Tomato!
So that's that. So this got me thinking,
Mm-hmm.
what other series would you like to see develop into a TV show? And I would always think that before this news came out, I would have thought that Lord of the Rings was, off the table. I just thought that it was one of those brands that you wouldn't want to see it dwelling with the common folk on TV. So now it's like, if that property could do it, any property could do it. So what other franchises would you like to see developed into a TV series?
Okay, like you said, like any property could do it. Because when I was younger, I used to always want this, but I was just like, nah. The franchise is too big. They would never do it. But I always thought Batman, you know what I'm saying, could really work like as an HBO series, like with the right funding. Because
you think they would go to HBO right now?
Because to me, that's where just Time Warner, like they have that's their company. They own it. It wouldn't work on the CW because budget restrictions, and that would just ruin the brand. Like they wouldn't risk that. But I'm saying with HBO, with heavy production, especially with the success they've had with Game of Thrones, and like you said, they're not afraid to put money, so they wouldn't have the budget restrictions. It would maybe be like a 8-10 episode per season. And it's just like with Batman, he has such a big rogues gallery, like where you could really do a lot of detective, really exhaustive storyline telling. Because sometimes with the live action, you can't really get that with Batman. But I really feel like he's the one character where he has so many stories to tell. Like I really was thinking like, okay, with the way television has come up, it's really like prestige now. Like it's not like a joke anymore where it's just like, you have these episodes and cliffhangers and all this stuff. Like, no, you could really, really tell a nice knit story that people will actually respect and actually flock to. So I was thinking, you know what? They could really do a Batman TV show. That was like my hope. I don't know if...
Totally agree with you. The only issue I have with that is you do not want that happening the same time the DCEU is going on. That's one thing I do like, the fact that... what Marvel does, they're not going to put a Daredevil into their movies because it's like, well, they got the TV show going on. We don't want to confuse the audience. You don't want to see Green Arrow appear in, these movies that they got going on because it's like, well, they got the TV show. They broke that rule when they put in Commissioner Gordon, because, technically the TV show is doing a younger version of him. So I really think you don't want these properties bleeding over into one another. So I do think that's something that would work on the horizon, but the DCEU has to either succeed or fail.
That's my only.
But
that's my only. I agree with you because that's the thing. The DCEU, they're so afraid of, like, it's always Batman centric. They're afraid of like putting that guy on the shelf. That's why you always like they always recast Batman every like 5 to 10 years. Like he never
currently the top 4 from a box office perspective. Batman is the top 4 property. You got Star Wars, Marvel, then you got Batman. I'm missing somebody in that. I just don't remember who.
Maybe James Bond or Spider-Man?
James Bond is after that. It's number 5, and Spider-Man is like number 7. I'm missing somebody, but continue.
Yeah, so it's just like, would they really, because with a TV show, you probably need at least 5 to 7 seasons to have a successful run, really. So would they, and altogether, that'll probably come out to maybe 10 years altogether. Would Disney, would Warner Brothers really want to put Batman on the shelf for 10 years? Like, I don't know. You know what I'm saying? Like,
they got, really don't. And believe it or not, they got the money to, because the other series that I left off, franchise, it's the Wizarding World. So it's the Harry Potter films, and also, the last Fantastic Beasts. So all of that is Warner Brothers. So, you know what I mean? So they own 2 out of the top 4 performing, box office draws. Yeah. But for me, I'm actually going to go with a smaller property. I'm going to go with a property that's not currently doing well in cinema. So it'll be a easier transition to the smaller screen. So Predator. I think they squeezed the lemon on this franchise, and a TV show would give it some new life. What's funny is that shows like Lost and The Walking Dead were and are huge rating, boosts for their networks. And this franchise has a lot of similarities that would translate to high ratings, right? So it's just like, okay, being hunted or being the hunter, that's just like Walking Dead, you know, and people like to see that play out on a weekly basis. And the same thing with Lost, you know, being stranded on the island. That's the, you know, I know the Predator franchise took that turn a couple of times. So that's something that I think it would be cheap because you do not need a lot of characters. You could easily rotate characters in and out because of deaths and stuff like that, like who's going to die this week type deal. So I would actually like to see that play out. Honestly, I think when you look at Predator, so, like a lot of the fans that loved Predators and some of the sequels, they were fans of the 80s. Like I watched that series in the 80s. I keep saying series, but I watched that franchise in the 80s. So even as a kid, I liked Predator 2, which is horrible, by the way. So a lot of people holding on to that franchise and supporting it, they're like my age and up. So in order to introduce it to some new blood, I do think that you need to give it a TV series.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Especially like you with the mention of Lost and Walking Dead. Like you said, people have a hunger for that, and the way they set up the story, like, and I was like, I remember thinking that a few years back. I don't know if it was like a rumor or something or of a new movie, but I remember thinking like, yeah, that could work as a TV show. And the fact that you brought it up now is just like, that would be perfect. Like it would really lend itself.
Okay, for a second I thought you were going to try to steal my idea, but it looks like you're not. But it looks like you tried to credit my idea to a magazine or something. I remember Variety reporting that. It's a fresh take. It's my idea, so let's not poo-poo my idea.
No, I was actually
let me hear
piggybacking on your idea. Like,
okay, that's what you call it. All right, but give me. I got two more. They're probably not going to be as good as the idea that I just explained. But give me another one of your ideas that would probably work better as a TV show.
We mentioned this before, like not necessarily, but we mentioned this property. Like we was like, oh, Harry Potter, and I was just like, yeah, that could work. Just
stop.
No, listen.
Because you know, you do know that's like my favorite. That's my favorite franchise. Not like, you know, like some people have Star Wars, some people have Lord of the Rings. Harry Potter was the universe that, you know, kept me awake waiting on trailers when I was younger. So I don't want to see it. Not now. I want to see what they do with Fantastic Beasts.
You don't have to. It doesn't have to be like with Harry Potter. Like you said, this is another franchise where their universe is huge. They could expand on it, and like you said, with Fantastic Beasts and all that stuff, they could really lend itself to just a television format, like where you have different characters, new characters, fresh faces, different stories. And it's like with Warner Brothers, they're not going to hold back with Harry Potter. Like you said, this is top 4 all-time movie making.
Yep.
They're not going to just sit back and like watch Disney continue to dominate. They're going to bring this. They're going to bring this out.
Did you like Fantastic Beasts?
It wasn't.
Did you like Harry Potter, the film?
Yeah, it was straight. I never really watched all of them, but the few that I watched, it was straight. Like I always, yeah, right. Go ahead.
So that's the thing. I think people like me, because if you need to sell this to anybody, you need to sell it to me, because I'm the target audience for Harry Potter. Fantastic Beasts, I thought it was okay. The only reason I'm holding out hope is because if you watch Sorcerer's Stone, it is the weakest movie. You know, it depends. You know, some people say Order of the Phoenix or whatever, but it's not. It doesn't pull you in automatically to continue to watch the franchise. So I always tell people you got to get the Goblet of Fire or Prisoner of Azkaban. That's when you realize, oh shoot, it just got real. With Fantastic Beasts may do that, maybe because it's their introduction, it wasn't as good to me, but that would have played out better as a TV show. But if you're doing a Harry Potter TV series, the words Harry Potter need to be involved, or at least his offspring, like his son. I would be anxious to see what they do. But if they're doing, oh, this took place before Harry Potter, or this took place after, like their biggest baddie in that universe is He Who Shall Not Be Named. And if you don't name him for a series, I'm not that interested. But that's just me. So my turn. This actually might not work. I might get a couple of boos, but I want you guys to hear me out. So I'm picking Battleship. Only because the movie was so horrible, right? But the property is so well known because of the board game. And that's the reason why they actually took a huge risk and spent like I think it was like $250 million on this movie. It's
Yeah,
one of
it's
the biggest busts in Hollywood, by the way. But I think Hasbro properties work better for TV. Period. Transformers and G.I. Joe, before those guys were on your big screen, they were on your Saturday morning cartoon lineup.
Mm-hmm.
So if you give me a live action of Battleship or Transformers or G.I. Joe, I'd much rather see a live action show for those properties than another film. Because I think they keep trying to do movies. And if the last Transformers movies showed you anything, it's that we kind of don't care anymore. So push it through the streaming circuit rather than us having to, pay for popcorn, nachos, and really feel cheated when we actually watch, the properties that you release in cinema. So I put Battleship, and it's okay to boo.
No, I think that's a good idea, because I would rather like lead with G.I. Joe. Like, I thought that was gonna be like the premise that if you were gonna pick from those properties.
I switched it up at the end because I felt like I'm burying myself. But G.I. Joe would work, and they put Rock in that franchise thinking it was gonna save him.
Nah,
it did not.
Not even close.
If anything, putting RZA in that film buried them. it ensured their burial. The worst accent I've ever heard. Moving along, I got one more after this, but let me hear one more from you.
I was thinking with Fox, like, since they have so many mutants and stuff, I was thinking maybe just have a storyline with like just Magneto, or storyline just with Wolverine. Because like I said, I really think like these characters, they have so many different stories, and it's just like you're not gonna see them all played out with the movies. So I was just thinking you could still connect it with like the main universe, but like you could have like a gritty FX series where you could, what I'm saying, show a little more content. Have it be on cable, not necessarily on like the Fox.
Even if you put it on FX, compare it to what they're allowed to do on Amazon and what they're allowed to do on Netflix, it's not going to compare. You're able to show anything you want.
FX good. Like, don't get me wrong, it's not.
No, it don't. Not like Netflix does. I'm talking about like they still have limitations, man. They do, because they got limitations, because when they show certain X-Men movies, they have to censor it.
Yeah.
So I know they can't get there. You know what I mean? And X-Men movies are rated PG-13. So it's like, I feel you. But also, let me ask you this question. When you first watched Daredevil, before you watched Daredevil, were you a fan of like the actual property, like Daredevil?
He was okay. Like, I was like a big fan, but I used to watch him in like
Fox 29.
Yeah, the cartoon with Spider-Man.
Yep.
Yeah. But I was
same here. But I know you watched him on the Fox 29 thing, but he wasn't a huge thing that you needed to see in the movies.
No.
So, but now that the show's come out, you know about his character, you like his character more. Same thing with Punisher. I've never watched any of the Punisher films. I'm talking about other than the Dolph Lundgren movie from the 80s. I never watched that stuff that they were coming out with I think in the 90s and the late early millennium. So it's like I've never been interested in his character, but after Daredevil, it gets me invested to know about this character. So I think the idea is whenever you create a TV series, it's supposed to draw you into the universe to where, okay, you go research the comics, you go buy the toys, you go buy the paraphernalia. So if you give me characters that I've already seen fleshed out on the big screen, I'm not going to be that invested. And I guess that's my logic here. It's like you get to introduce this stuff that people don't necessarily know. And it will, like, if you do decide to come out with the movie down the road, now you'll have more people invested. I think Professor X, we done seen him played by 4 different characters when you include the child, the teenager, the college student, and the old guy. It's same thing with Magneto. So it's like, I don't know if I want to see that. I do know that Marvel is experimenting with TV shows centered around mutants that we don't know. And I do think that's a good idea. But we'll see. My last one, I picked Dungeons and Dragons. They had a movie and it was just horrible. It starred Jimmy from The Adventures of Lois and Clark and Marlon Wayans. But
oh man,
yeah. So the property is huge, and thanks to references in Stranger Things, some folks would watch the show just because of those references. So I think they need to strike the iron while it's hot, and they need to go ahead and develop a series centered around Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I agree. Like you said, that property, it would have enough of a resurgence, and you know, fans are hungry for things like that. So yeah, that definitely could work. And man, I didn't even know they had that. They really had a.
Yeah, bro. I remember it when it was like trailers. I forgot what VHS it was in front of. You know, like that's how I used to remember trailers. It's like, oh, this was in front of the Senseless movie. But I just remember, what is Marlon doing? Like, why does that girl from Dr. Dolittle have elf ears? This is ridiculous. And I just never saw it, but apparently no one else did.
Thank God.
So yeah, and believe it or not, that's what made me familiar with the game Dungeons and Dragons. So when you know, VH1 did I Love the 80s, they did a sequence on Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm like, oh, the Marlon Wayans movie. Oh, this was a thing in the 80s? So that's how I became familiar with the property. You could argue Stranger Things is already doing this because it has a lot of influence from Dungeons and Dragons, but I think you could do something around that, like, you know, characters from that movie, or just don't make it Jumanji like we're stuck in the game, and I just don't want to see that.
You like tomato
and you like tomato,
potato,